the meeting went well this time around, did it? On Monday, your meeting on Monday.
Yes, we had a meeting with the, the last time we met, we took like a 10 working days adjournment so that we'll all go back to the drawing board. We have discussions with our partners and we return back to the table. So we actually went back on Monday to have that conversation on Monday 19th. So we had that meeting, and during the meeting we looked at different areas. We looked at where we stopped the last time. We took appraisal of the things we need to do moving forward, and how can we start implementing most of these things, because again, Nigerians don't want a lot of talk, and it will turn to another talk shop, just as we have known. So largely I could say the meeting went well, because we agreed jointly to have the Presidential Steering Committee. Then beyond the Presidential Steering Committee, just as you have highlighted as well, some of the breakdown. But at the end of the meeting, the labor input was also sorted. In fact, I'm just coming from a meeting now where we are also trying to make further input into what you have just read. What you have just read is not the finality, because we are also making our input into it.
And I know that Labour also from the TUC point of view, you have your own demands, which will come to, which a lot of people will say, since the increase in the price of fuel, it was about 160% increase, and in some other states, it's more, depending on the distance of the movement of the product from Lagos up, whether north or south. And in this case, the price of commodities have changed. A lot of things have changed. Our lives are not remained the same since then. We started thinking of alternatives of some of these issues. The NNPC has been saying that there are more jobs that are being created. I don't know how true is that. You heard that, isn't it? That since the stoppage of free subsidy on petrol, that there is some provision of jobs.
Well, I think as of today, we cannot actually verify that. Maybe we wait for statistics from the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, because as of today, that for us, we cannot verify. Shehu, the last time I was here, this was part of a challenge that we were talking about. That, that the provision of the subsidy was there till the end of June. That the best thing to have been done is that all parties, all stakeholders should have sat down together. What we are trying to do today were the things we were supposed to have discussed between May 29th and the end of June, so that it will not be medicine after death. If we had sat down, like the issues you've talked about, like the issues of CNG, like these other palliatives that we are talking about today, these are the palliatives that should have been discussed in 1 month prior to the end of June. But as of today, just as you have alluded to, Nigerians are facing a lot of hardship all across, and it's really hard and it's really terrible.
It's a hard time. Things were hard before the increase in the price of fuel, and the NNPC GMD was here on this program, and he said, look, the federal government has been defaulting in the payment of the subsidy. There's a backlog. And there is provision in the budget, but the federal government has been defaulting. In reality, there's really no payment of subsidy, and there are a lot of Nigerians who believe that it was in the right direction. The likes of Bill Gates, Aliko Dangote, and some other eminent Nigerians have thought that the decision was the right one. But you are insisting, as the bodies of labor union, that there must have been some consultation. But where we are at right now, if you look at what the NEC agreed on, is it a way to go? Petroleum allowances, also CNG issues, they're also thinking about getting money from funding partners. Are you aware of that?
Yes, first of all, the challenge here is this. It's just like a company. So you have the board of directors and you have the management of a company, and you bring them in to manage the company. In most cases, when they mismanage the company, at the end of the day, they will tell you that they are declaring redundancy and that they are firing personnel. So personnel cost, it's always the soft target in any organization. So the same thing. We understand that Nigeria has been passing through some monetary and fiscal policies pressure over the years. But who brought us to where we are today? So it is the easiest target, the people. Okay, the only commodity that is being subsidized for the people, at the end of the day, it was taken away. So the people actually are the easiest target. Some of the questions that Nigerians have asked over the period is that what has government brought to the table? You hear today that the Salaries and Wages Commission are thinking of increasing the emolument of the political office holders. So that is what we have been asking. You are asking the people to tighten their belts. But at the end of the day, what have you brought to the table? What is the contribution of the political class to this economic logjam that we have today, or that we have today as a country? Today, for example, if you see one of the demands that you said we will get there. Yes, if you look at it, you could see something. We talk about the cost of governance. Today, you still import all manner of cars from different parts of the world, but you have some cars that are being manufactured in Nigeria. Why can't you create policies that would encourage the manufacturing sector and also reduce the cost of governance by, for example, looking at the Nigeria-made vehicles, for example, the convoys that you see governors, they are still going about business as usual. You see the new legislatures, you see their convoys is endless. So clearly, what we are saying is that if federal government was not able to fund subsidy, at whose expense? What were the things they were doing with our funds? All the money that they have borrowed, the ways and means that went over 23 trillion, what did they do with it? They need to also offer explanations to Nigerians. Not that at the slightest provocation, they push Nigerians to the streets. They push Nigerians and they tell them that we must tighten our belt. Meanwhile, they are loosening theirs. So these are all the conversations. What the governors have put on the table. Yes, these are all the issues that we are looking at as labor. Not just the state government, even the federal government. And that is the conversations we are having in order for us to have, we are currently putting together the terms of reference of those subcommittees so that we'll look at these issues critically and we will examine them and we'll come up with a position or what we think will solve or rather ameliorate the pains of Nigerians as of today.
Before I go into some of the demands that TUC had put forward, you mentioned the issue of cost of governance. Have you put forward to the federal government that, look, if you are serious federal government or people in the executive, that you mean business, cut governance in these areas and in this area. Have you put forward to them practical examples of where they can cut down and tighten their bets?
Yes, absolutely. If you look at the demand that we submitted, and if you even look at the committee you talked about, there's a committee on the cost of governance.
Absolutely.
And so that is what that committee will do. And we are very serious about it. This is not lip service. It can no longer be business as usual. So when the committee gets to work, we have lists of areas, both at the federal government, at the state government, MDAs, parastatals. We have lists that we have put forward on how we think some of these issues could be mitigated. Because if we don't do that, if we don't checkmate them, at the end of the day, it's going to bite hard on the people. Because if you look at the revenue, most of our revenue today is going into recurrent expenditure. And if we continuously push our revenue to, and if we continuously push our revenue to the recurrent expenditure, and the recurrent expenditure continuously soar, they will come again tomorrow. They can even tell us to start paying 50% tax on the petroleum product.
A lot of people
and those are the issues that we will.
A lot of people will even raise question mark on, for example, because I was asking for practical examples of where federal government can tighten their bets. For example, there was a report that says that it cost about 80 billion naira to fund the management of the presidential fleets in 2022. That kind of example is what Nigerians perhaps, if you're asking that, federal government, if you want to look serious, or state governors or legislatures, if you want to be serious, show Nigerians examples of how tough things are and how you are cutting costs. Have you listed those kind of examples today?
You are very correct. I don't want to preempt the work of the committee, and these are part of the things that we will look at. Beyond that at all, if you look at over the years, if you look at our budgeting system, they do the envelope kind of budgeting system. If you look at the budgeting system in the last 3, 4, 5 years, you will see that a lot of items are recurring. For example, they tell you that they want to buy computers in in the State House. So every year, the budget for about 1,000, 2,000 computers are in the State House. If you even look at the issue of the service-wide vote, they lump in a lot of money into it. 3 trillion, 4 trillion, 5 trillion into service-wide vote, and most of this money at the end of the day, they will tell you that is the shortfalls in other ministries that they want to channel this money into, and most of these things are not audited. So if today, if you close down the service-wide vote, for example, or you reduce it by 80%, you are going to save nothing less than about 3 to 4 trillion naira. And that money can be pushed into capital expenditure. So those are some of the challenges. The presidential fleet you talked about is one of the things we will look at. What is the cost of managing it? And most of these costs, do they actually go into what they are meant for? Then in the presidency, for example, what is the cost of feeding? If you see the cost of feeding, for example, and cost of entertainment is humongous. How can we cut down that? You come to National Assembly, you see that their budget has actually gone up. So we also have to look at that, because they must also sacrifice. But if you tie that to what the salaries and the wages commission are doing today, you will see that they are even jacking up the pay of the political office holders. Why those that are down there below, down there, any 30,000 naira are living in misery? So we must push this through.
Part of the argument that Labour been putting forward in the past few days, the issues of how the 800 million US dollars that the past government proposed to the World Bank, which they were seeking approval of the National Assembly, part of the plan, which is also recurring in the subcommittee and reflecting that they will go ahead, is the issue of cash transfers, handout like social investment programs of the federal government. And I remember you mentioned to us that you have your questions over the deployment of the resources, the data, the diary, and the register of those programs, and how effective it is. And you're looking at the fact that you don't really trust it, but it's still reflective here. You think that, and you've said it, that those 5,000 naira being given to people, Nigerians, may not amount to anything.
Yes, that's correct.
But it's still reflective here.
Yes. What the committees are going to do, the subcommittees, the technical committees, they are all going to sit down. Then these processes will be reviewed, where we need to bring in some consultants to look at the data that they have. We can bring in PwC and KPMG and the likes to look at this data and actually interrogate those data, because they are telling us that they have a data that works and they believe in the process and what they are doing. We said no, that the conditional cash transfer that you have done, that it has not worked. Just as you have highlighted, we talked about the data, we talked about the BVN numbers, we talked about all these. But they also said, there was also a conversation to say that they want to expand this even to those that are the lower income earners, both in the private sector as well as the public sector. So the purpose of that committee is to now review, take holistic review of the entire system, to see how functioning it is, and to also see if what they said, what they have claimed over the years that they have been doing, if it actually gets to the people. So we don't mind bringing people that are sophisticated in data analytics and those that can actually assist us in querying that process. If we don't trust the process, we will not support it.
All right. Let's look at something. And I have a few concerns here, a few questions about your proposal, the demands of the TUC to the federal government. And this was as at the 4th of June. And you said that this is for immediate implementation. One of it is that you want status quo to be maintained on the price of petrol. And that means that you want us to go, the federal government to maintain 184.
Yeah, approximately.
Yeah. So that is your first demand. But is that realistic? Because they started implementing, they said there's no going back.
When you put a charter of demand, a charter of demand is not your finality. So what we put together was what we think will work. When you go into negotiations, at the end of the day, you also listen to the other party. So for us, we felt that go back to the status quo, let us continue our conversation. But in the part of federal government, they also explained that if they go back to the status quo, that at the end of the day, and they now announce that they want to commence at the end of June, that's going to be problematic because marketers will hold their products and queues will return all over the country. So they also put that forward as well. So it was also left for us to do a review of that holistic.
Are you looking at a meeting as a middle point?
Yes, in negotiations, you always look at middle points. But overall, at the end of the day, the neck of TUC in our meeting, what we assured was that, yes, we will continuously push government to go back. But we should not close door to conversations. We should not close door to negotiations. That was why we now moved on to the other list in the demand.
So you said on the second on your list of demand is minimum wage should be increased from the current 30,000 to 200,000 naira before the end of June 2023 with consequential adjustment on cost of living allowance like feeding, transport, and housing. And I asked this question. In the 2023 budget, over 8 trillion is budgeted for recurrent expenditure. That's over 40% of the entire budget, which a lot of people consider that is too high considering what is budgeted for capital expenditure and other things. So if you say this, I'm trying to calculate the percentage of 30,000 to 200,000. That's almost 150 or more percentage on increase that you are looking at. It then means that, for example, the recurrent expenditure, 40 times 150, 40% times 150%, that's perhaps what we'll be going into. So if we have 8 trillion, the federal government should be budgeting something very high, maybe in the region of 20 trillion to be able to pay salaries.
I know. First of all, that recurrent expenditure is not just salaries alone. If you look at the breakdown of recurrent expenditure, it's not just the salaries of civil service or civil servants. But again, if you are going to negotiation, you don't start from your rock bottom. So for us, we did an analysis of what could be the commensurate pay for Nigerian workers today to be the minimum as a benchmark. Then when we calculated that minimum, we had to add a premium to it because you must leave a room for dialogue, you must leave some room for negotiations. We've been asked, why 200,000 naira? And for us, it was very simple. We had some conversation a while ago, I think it was in this station, in one of your sister's program, where we stated that the reason we went to that was because we know that federal government wanted to float the currency. Today, you know that if before now, if government was selling, let's assume they said they were spending 4 billion naira on the subsidy per month. If that is anything to go by, what that means is that because today the naira has been floated, that 400 billion naira was actually based on 450 naira CBN exchange rate to $1. But today, it is about 700 plus, which is almost about 70-80% much more. So if that is correct, what that means is that they would have been spending nothing less than 700 billion naira per month. So the question we have asked is that if you were the money that you have saved, they said they will save money. So what percentage of this money will go to Nigerians, number one? And secondly as well, if you look at what the minimum wage was agreed on in 2019, what was our inflation rate as at 2019? What was the purchasing power parity? What was the so if you put all these economic indicators together, and as at then the exchange rate as at 2019 was about 360 naira. So if you put all these together, you look at the inflation between 2019 and today. By the time you compound that inflation, it's over 80%. Then when you now also look at the exchange rate between that time and now, you could see that the exchange rate has also moved by appreciable percentage. So when you compare this into the 30,000, you could see that there is need for us to do something massive. Not just something minimal, but something massive. Yeah. So again, to anchor that here, as government must put on their thinking cap. You cannot continuously tell us. I mean, we can't continue business as usual. You must put on your thinking cap on how to generate revenue. You must put on your thinking cap on how to attract foreign direct investment and foreign portfolio investment. This is why government exists. Government is not, I mean, there's no easy solution anywhere.
Yeah. Comrade, there's a whole long list that you have demanded. I've touched on a bit of some of those that are very critical, the cost and a few other things, the CNG and or what have you. We'll look at how the negotiations continue in the coming days, and hopefully whatever the government is putting forward, it does look to me that the government is between the wall and a hard place, and there's no place to turn. Now they can't go back on their decision. The Nigerian people are suffering and feeling the heat, and they need to face it and be able to deal with the issue, and I hope that they take the right decision. Thank you so much, Comrade Festus Osifo, President of TUC. Thank you so much indeed for
Thank you so much, sir.